Undeterred by a bulky escalator and glitchy teleprompter, President Trump brings MAGA to the United Nations as raging wars in Gaza and Ukraine undercut his peacemaker resume. Joe Manchin on President Trump's missed opportunity to unite the country and the lose-lose scenario that stalks our current and seemingly recurrent shutdown showdown. And leadership forged by high stress, high visibility successes and failures. Retired Special Operations General Stanley McChrystal walks us through both. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to the Takeout. Quote, I run the country and the world. You might remember President Trump told that to the Atlantic magazine back in April. The President addressed the United Nations today and gave that declaration startling force as Trump belittled nations that have not mirrored his hostility to immigration and renewable energy. He spoke in apocalyptic terms about both, describing renewable energy and immigration as a double-tailed monster bent on civilizational destruction. This is the President on climate change.
It's the greatest con job ever perpetrated on the world, in my opinion. We're getting rid of the falsely named renewables. By the way, they're a joke. They don't work. They're too expensive.
About immigration, the President said nations all over the world have a duty to protect their populations from different religions, different cultures, in the President's hyper-simplified language, different everything. Now, there has been backlash to immigration in Europe, but most countries there still embrace the free flow of peoples and find their societies, in the main, enriched by immigration. Trump went so far as to accuse the mayor of London of wanting to import Sharia law.
I look at London, where you have a terrible mayor, terrible mayor, and it's been so changed, so changed.
Several people in the United Kingdom said that that reference to Sharia law was factually inaccurate. London's mayor did not respond directly to Trump, but he did note a new immigration trend in the United Kingdom, a 34% increase in requests from U.S. citizens for UK citizenship, this in the past year. The roughly 7,300 applications, the mayor noted, marked the highest number of requests from Americans since 2004. Now, not all of the president's speech rankled. He said this about Gaza, Hamas, and the move among some Western democracies, as well as other nations, to recognize a Palestinian state that does not yet exist.
As if to encourage continued conflict, some of this body is seeking to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. The rewards would be too great for Hamas terrorists for their atrocities. And instead of giving in to Hamas's ransom demands, those who want peace should be united with one message: release the hostages now. Just release the hostages now.
Trump also said this, and it's really important, quote, I do, when asked directly if he thought NATO jets should shoot down Russian jets if they violate their airspace. Why do I bring this up? Because that's not what his Secretary of State told CBS News just this morning.
I don't think anyone said about shooting down Russian jets unless they're attacking. I think what you have seen is NATO responding to those intrusions the way we respond to them all the time, and that is when they enter your airspace or your defense zone, you go up and you intercept them, and that's what NATO has done, and that's what NATO will continue to do.
As the old saying goes, the whole world is watching. That's what happens when a U.S. president addresses the United Nations, and this address, mark my words, will go down in the history books as a marker of what Trump means and what he can and cannot influence in his attempts to run the world. We begin tonight with Ed O'Keefe here with me at the family table. Ed, I want to bring your attention to a social media post quite separate from the many rhetorical flourishes the president left behind at the United Nations General Assembly. It reads as follows, Control Room, I think Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position to fight, and all caps, win all of Ukraine back in its original form. That may be the biggest thing he said all day.
And probably the biggest thing he said, frankly, in weeks, because it is a huge strategic shift now if this is what he
really believes, and his policy will sort of move in this direction.
Absolutely. And if it does move in that direction, big if, because it's only Tuesday, and he just happened to come out of a meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky right before he typed it, or right after he typed this, it suggests now he's finally understood what the rest of the world's been trying to tell him, except for Russia and a handful of others. And what's telling about this whole lengthy statement in Truth Social is he says, after getting to know and fully understand the Ukraine-Russia military and economic situation, which means it took him 9 months to get up to speed on this and essentially return U.S. policy to what it had been, which is that Ukraine shouldn't have to give an inch, Russia should back off, and we will stand with Ukraine. And by then saying this morning, go ahead and blow Russian jets out of the sky if they violate NATO airspace, that completely redefines his approach to this war at this point and must have the Europeans just thrilled and relieved.
And does suggest that this long-promised serious consideration of sanctions against Russia, in addition to the ones that already exist, may become more operational.
Which is why I'm saying it's only Tuesday.
Right.
Because by the time
you have
Congress...
to hedge those conversations.
Right, because by the time Congress gets back, something will have happened. Remember now, he's got on the table an offer from the Russian president to extend the New START nuclear safety treaty, in essence, for another year, which means there's going to be engagement at some point soon between the U.S. and Russia again. What else will happen in that conversation that perhaps pulls him back from this? But that he went to New York and says this on the world stage after meeting with Zelensky again certainly is going to be seen as encouraging to a lot of allies who've been wanting him to get closer to this position.
And if, in fact, this is the position of the Trump administration, that Ukraine can win and get all of its original form, that would go even before what happened in the Obama administration in Crimea.
And you would think there's incentive for Trump to push for that, because then he can say, not only did I clean up Biden's mess, but I cleaned up the mess that started under Obama. And look what I was able to do, but restore Ukraine to what it was before those two Democratic presidents. So that might be part of why he's suggesting now all of it. But again, it's only Tuesday.
Vladimir Putin, call your office.
Yeah.
Ed O'Keefe.
Good to see you.
Always a pleasure. Ohio Democratic Congressman Greg Landsman joins me now here in the wall. Congressman, great to see you. The president said a lot of things at the United Nations General Assembly. Take your pick.
I just think, overall, it's just confusing. I mean, you want a president, or at least we've always had a president, and you want to continue to have presidents who provide direction and clarity and vision every day, right? It's reassuring, and it helps us understand where we're going and how we're going to get there and what we need and all those things. And to have him go to the UN and just be all over the place it's frustrating, and I think it's frustrating to people whose work and lives are on the line, particularly folks in, the Middle East and in Ukraine.
The president said recognizing a Palestinian state that does not yet exist is a reward to Hamas. Do you agree?
I don't know if it's a reward to Hamas. I mean, certainly it's something that suggests, hey, if you invade another country and brutally murder innocent people, there may be a reward at the end of a long war. So in that sense, sure. The challenge here is you want our commander-in-chief, our leader, to be very clear about what needs to happen, because most people do believe in a two-state solution. They need to understand, as they probably do, that that's something that gets negotiated between the Palestinians and the Israelis, that there has to be clarity on the borders, on who's in charge. Is it a legitimate governing authority? What are the security arrangements? All of those things have to be part of the process, and that can only happen when the war's over, the hostages have been returned, and there's a coalition of countries, the United States, Israel, and these Arab countries that are done with Hamas that rebuild Gaza and can get us back to a place where we're negotiating. That's leadership and vision and clarity. He's not offering that.
Do you detect what Ed O'Keefe and I detected, that in this social media post from the president about Ukraine, there might be something approximating a tectonic shift in administration policy?
Yes, but there's always a big shift in policy. That's part of the chaos. It's part of the frustration. For those of us who really believe that this all has to be run well, right? Like government needs to be run well, and it needs to be run by people who are serious and are surrounded by serious people. I hope this is a new direction where he's going to stand beside our allies as we always have, and push Putin back. But it's a sentence so far, or a couple of sentences, no real clarity on the strategy, and he's obviously not doing that in partnership with our allies. But if that's what happens, that's great.
How do you evaluate, Congressman, what the president said about renewable energy, climate change, and migration globally?
Well, he said in his opinion, so it's true in his opinion that may be true, but
Meaning true to him.
true to him, sure, but it's not true. And people know it's not true. We know most people know we have a serious crisis on our hands all over the world, and here we have these severe weather events all the time now, and it's costing local folks a lot of money. I mean, in Cincinnati, we have these massive rain events where hillsides slide into roads. You got sewer backups. They want leaders who take in an all of the above energy policy, including renewables. Like China, we need to be competitive with China. China does all of the above, and we have to as well. We have to get serious about meeting the energy needs of the country and addressing climate change. And there's huge bipartisan opportunities here. I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee. We want to get this done. The problem is there isn't leadership at the top.
And when the president says migration is ruining Europe and changing countries there into unrecognizable forms, how do you evaluate that?
I guess he's good at telling us what the problem is. He's bad at solving it, right? There's clear pathways to solving immigration, border security issues. We have a bipartisan agreement on border security, a durable border security, on immigration reform, reforms to the asylum process, pathways for folks to come here and work. We have bipartisan support for that. The challenge is we don't have the leadership at the top from the White House to get those things done. So he likes to and has gotten good at telling people what the problem is and doing so in a way that's very divisive, which does not help the United States of America or the world, and not following any of that up with a solution or a set of solutions that bring people together to get something done.
Ohio Democratic Congressman Greg Langsman. Congressman, I appreciate the time. Thanks. In Florida, a jury has returned a guilty verdict in the trial of the man accused of attempting to assassinate President Trump on his golf course last year. Ryan Routh was convicted on all 5 federal charges, including attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate. Christian Benavides is in Fort Pierce, Florida, outside the courthouse. Christian, what happened?
Major, it was quite a dramatic development. After that, Ryan Routh was found guilty on all counts, including, as you mentioned, attempted assassination of a major presidential candidate, and also the having a firearm with an obliterated serial number. Ryan Routh attempted to harm himself. This was just after the jury had left the courtroom, putting a pen up to his neck, and his daughter, witnessing all of this, started screaming in the middle of the courtroom. And again, quite a dramatic end. At this moment is when he was finally taken by the U.S. Marshals that were inside the courtroom. But again, this was following the jury leaving the courtroom and following that verdict. Guilty on all 5 counts. The verdict not necessarily surprising. Remember that Ryan Routh decided to represent himself throughout this entire trial. All of this has made the trial go much quicker than initially anticipated, only lasted about 2 weeks, and the jury only deliberated for about 2 hours before coming back with that verdict. Prosecutors bringing in nearly 40 witnesses and laying out their case, both their case on the forensics that they had found on the scenes and the digital forensics behind all of this, cell phone tower data. In addition to this, you also had DNA that had been found at the scene. quite a lot of evidence against Ryan Routh, who once again decided to represent himself, and his defense the entire time was that essentially his character was not one that was capable of something like this. He brought up only 3 witnesses, and in the end, during closing arguments today, the prosecution took the entire hour and 45 minutes that was slotted to them, while Ryan Routh only took about 30 minutes, going off on tangents, speaking about the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. At one point said that he had plans to buy a boat. Judge Eileen Cannon at one point even told the jury to step outside of the courtroom and reminded him to stay on topic. But once again, the headline here, guilty on all counts, and his attempt to harm himself following that verdict. Major?
With all the details and braving the rain and technical gremlins, Christian Benavides, I appreciate it very, very much. With the government shutdown a week away, President Trump pulls the plug on a meeting with top congressional Democrats. Now, a shutdown can still be averted. So we're going to explore the pre-shutdown political jousting already apparent. The View from the self-proclaimed center, former West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, a thorn in the side of the Biden White House on the fits and starts of the second Trump administration, and retired 4-star General Stanley McChrystal, his lessons on leadership, a preview of his soon-to-release online course. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to Takeout. Joe Manchin's new book, Dead Center in Defense of Common Sense, is a memoir. It's kind of a declaration of independence from political extremes he says exist on both sides. It might even be a primer for a presidential campaign. Whatever it is, I sat down with a former West Virginia lawmaker earlier today. Listen. Senator Manchin, always great to see you. Dead Center is the title of the book. We'll get to that in a second. But there's a lot going on in Washington, as you've seen. How do you evaluate Trump 2.0?
There's some good things that have been done, and my state is very supportive. As you know, I'm in a state that's gone completely red. And the only thing I've told my Democrat friends, I said, listen, the things that you like that are done, okay, you can just say I made a mistake on the border, and I want to work with the president. The border has to be secured. You can say also in high crime areas that we want a crime-free area. I can tell your constituents do. And with that, say, when it's over, make sure I'm able to sustain what you showed me I need to do and help me. There's ways to handle this in a respectful way. And the hard thing about people today is that if you're on one side or the other, you're the enemy.
Trump makes declarations like that,
It's
though.
wrong.
He said at Charlie Kirk's memorial,
I know. I heard.
Charlie forgives and wants the better of his opponents. I don't. I hate my opponent.
That's not, let me just say, let me speak for myself. On a situation like that, one time when I first ran for election, 1982, I had a person who I thought was supporting me, and I found out double-crossed me. And I was upset. And that's okay.
Right. Human nature.
But my dad got it real quick. He said, come and have breakfast with me. After I won, he says, you're mad at so-and-so, aren't you? I said, yeah, Dad. I said, we thought all along he's working with us. We found he's working both sides. He said, okay, so what do you want to do? You don't want to serve him? You don't want to, give him any type of service whatsoever? I'll tell you what you do, Joe. If you're going to tell so-and-so, the heck with you, I'm not going to represent you, go to the courthouse, find out how much taxes he paid, write a check for his taxes, and just then go confront him and say, listen, I elect not to represent you because you didn't vote for me, or you double-crossed, or you were mad, whatever. And I never forgot that. And I said, Dad, I can't do that. He said, then keep your mouth shut and you serve everybody. You take the oath. It's not just for the people that vote for you. People vote against you.
But you talk in the book about polarization in Washington. Yeah. The President of the United States does feed some of that, doesn't he?
Oh, no, I've been begging for this. And I said, he is my president. People have spoken. I respect the representative form of government we have, and whoever the people speak, whether I vote for them or not, whether it's the same party or we're even friends or not. I want them to succeed. And being in the U.S. Senate for 15 years, I was in a position to try to help. And I was always looking to be helpful. But when I couldn't, I had to do it, and make sure they understood. I can't explain this back home, so I'm so sorry. I can't. If you can make some changes here, and that's how you start negotiating. But President Trump comes in pretty hot, pretty strong. You know where he's at. But you still have to say, Mr. President, I'm so sorry. I wish I could help. I would love to help. But right now, I'm asking President Trump, our president, for that better angel inside of him. I think it's in all of us that tells you, well, this is not right. We need him to comfort us. We need him to say, this is the United States, and bring people together. Don't keep pushing you apart, and don't think you're going to use the office for your own reprimands for people that basically haven't been on your side.
Do me a favor, diagram the shutdown scenario that you see playing out the next couple of weeks. The president said yesterday that he would meet with Charles Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, and he canceled it this morning. Republicans seem to be digging in on this. Democrats seem to be digging in on the issue of health care, Obamacare subsidies, and Medicaid change in the tax bill. Diagram how that's going to end.
I'm just diagram real. I can tell you very, very plain. I would never vote for a shutdown. Why penalize the good citizens of our country or my constituents? Why punish them because we can't do our job? That's it in a nutshell. And you meet with everybody up until that. You give it everything you have to find a compromise and a pathway forward. Now, I understand.
But you already see the politics playing out who's going to win the shutdown before it even happens.
Nobody wins. They're going to figure out who's the blame game. Who can blame?
Who's going to get blamed this time?
That's exactly. So
who do you think is going to get blamed?
Well, here, the president has, he's been the great deal maker, okay? He's always talked about deal makers. And anything I would say, if you don't believe the Democrats are sincere, prove it by meeting with them. Make them prove it that they just weren't sincere. And the people will accept it, and the president talks very plain and direct to people. And I think whoever advised him not to do that was not the best advice he probably could have gotten, because maybe he could have found a way forward. And a lot of his constituents don't want these Medicaid cuts.
Are they showing up in West Virginia? Do you fear that they will, from the big, beautiful bill, so-called?
Well, here's the thing about any bill. What's ironic is that both bills, marquee bills in both, when the Democrats were in charge and the Republican, are all BBBs.
Yeah.
Build Back Better and Big Beautiful Bill. So that was something. But if you have a piece of legislation and you know this is going to change America and it's going to help people's lives, why do you not implement it until 2 years from now? Because you're afraid of the pushback. It should have been sellable. Every Republican should have been out, and Democrats that could have supported it. I look at a bill that's going to help, and I says, I'll vote with my Republican friends on that. Or I'll basically go back and try to explain to my Democrats, we ought to be working with this to make it work. And that's what I'm not seeing happen. So if that's the case, then the Democrats are going to say, this is what's going to happen to you in 2027, okay? And probably says, no, it's not. No, it's not. Well, if it's not, then why don't we do it now if we needed it? You see? And the thing about in rural America, rural West Virginia, the Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, that's paying for a lot of the rural hospitals that are giving services they couldn't get before. Now, the thing I would look at, and very carefully, I says, have you all dissected and saw what we were doing before COVID shut down and how much we expanded during COVID? And if you can rationalize and say, guys, we didn't need to expand that much. We were trying to survive, didn't know what we were facing. Now can we start ratcheting back? You know, Major, better than anybody. When you expand, it's hard to retract.
Yep.
But you better have good reasons for doing it. And any dollar you save ought to go towards, really, the debt of the nation at approaching $37 trillion. That's going to be the downfall of America if we don't get our financial house in order. That's what I'm scared of, and nobody's talking about it.
You can watch my full interview with Joe Manchin. Believe me, we go round and round. The Democratic Party, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, lots of other topics. You can watch it on YouTube or listen to it on your favorite podcast platform. President Trump cancels a meeting with top Democrats as a government shutdown looms. What Hakeem Jeffries and Charles Schumer have to say about the upcoming funding fight. That's next, right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. I would love to tell you that we're going to cut to the chase with this shutdown scenario, but that's really hard to do because it's still a week away and there's lots of posturing that has to go on between now and then. But if anyone can help us at least get close to cutting to the chase, it's Nicole Killian on Capitol Hill. Nicole, carry on for us, please.
Well, look, Major, I think we're in troubled waters here. You know, the Congress is out this week. By the time they come back, if they come back, they're only going to have a day or two to scramble to try to resolve this before they're up against that government funding deadline. You know, there seemed to be a silver lining earlier this week when President Trump agreed to this meeting with congressional Democrats, but then within 24 hours, he canceled it, basically saying that the demands of Democrats were ridiculous, and so there's no way that he could possibly meet with him. Democrats countered, basically calling the president unhinged and saying that he's chickening out. Take a listen to what Leader Schumer and Leader Jeffries had to say about the cancellation.
Donald Trump, House Republicans, and Senate Republicans are running scared because they don't want the American people to be faced with the reality of what they have done in the context of a White House meeting, because Republicans have done such damage to everyday Americans.
By refusing to even sit down with Democrats, Donald Trump is causing the shutdown. This is a Trump shutdown, and he's barreling right towards it right now.
So with no meeting on the books, it's really unclear what the path forward is here. You know, Republican leaders continue to insist, look, let's just do a clean continuing resolution, keep things status quo, extend funding for the government for the next 7 weeks. That's what the Speaker has argued. That's what Leader Thune has argued. In fact, Leader Thune may bring that bill up again, even though it failed last week. But Democrats are saying, look, we really need some of these health care issues to be addressed, rolling back some of those Medicaid cuts in the big, beautiful bill, dealing with this issue of the Affordable Care Act and extending those subsidies before they run out at the end of the year. So, again, both sides continue to be at loggerheads, so we'll have to see how this plays out, Major, over the next couple of days.
The White House confirmed that meeting with congressional Democratic leaders yesterday. Then there was an intervention by congressional Republican leaders, and now things are back off. An interesting 24 hours has transpired for sure. Nicole Killian, thank you very much. Coming up, former Vice President Kamala Harris on Biden running in 2024, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, and her 107 days on the campaign trail. You guessed it, there's a new book out. More on that next here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Thanks for hanging out with us. Former Vice President Kamala Harris' new memoir, 107 Days, now available. No need to sift through excerpts anymore. You can buy it yourself if you are so moved. Now begins the media tour, as one, of course, follows the other. Harris says she does not regret refusing to lobby President Biden to forego a re-election campaign. Listen.
I can only take responsibility for myself. And on reflection, you know, and I talk about it in the context of asking a question of myself, was that grace to not bring it up to him, or was it reckless? And on my part, I do reflect on that and feel that there was a recklessness.
I want to bring in former Michigan Republican Congressman Fred Upton, who I've known for many, many years on Capitol Hill, and Democratic strategist and CBS News political contributor Chuck Rocha, who I sometimes admit that I've known for a long time. Chuck, it's great to see you. Fred, it's great to have you at the family table for the first time. Chuck, I'll let you go first because every losing presidential candidate has a period of time of recrimination. Now we're in this stage of self-recrimination. Evaluate what you've heard from the former vice president.
Well, I think it's her trying to keep herself relevant as we look to what she decides she wants to do. We have a presidential election in 3 years, and she wants to say, this was not my fault. This is what happened. This is how the campaign went. And she reminds everybody on the cover of the book, 107 days, which was exactly what all of her handlers said was the reason that she lost. So she puts it on the cover of the book. And look, for all of the Democrats out there that are like, oh, she shouldn't have wrote, she has every right to write the book. And she has every right to go in the book and say how she feels. What I think we're missing as Democrats is the forest for the trees. Because it's not her or the book, but it's all the people that were around her who've now failed up again, who are working on all these Democratic campaigns, running the same campaign again. That's what we should be talking about.
Fred, you are very well acquainted with Michigan politics and upper Midwest United States politics, which means Wisconsin and to a certain degree Ohio. Ohio's now red, safely Trump, but Wisconsin, Michigan still up for grabs. What did Democrats miss in both those states in 2024 that if they're going to come back, they need to figure out? And what do Republicans need to keep doing to keep them in the Trump category?
They have to talk about governing. So in Michigan, actually, we're a pretty critical state in all regards, but we're likely going to have a statewide shutdown like the federal government may have starting next week. So it'll be a double shutdown for Michigan. Nobody wins on this. I've been through a lot, left the Congress in 22, 23. And, you know, nobody wins. Everyone still gets paid at the end of the day, but the disruption, no matter how long
And is that a symptom of dysfunction in Washington now coming down and trickling down to state level politics?
It is. And with Trump now saying today he's not going to meet with Schumer or Jeffries, I mean, so how are we going to connect the dots?
How do we resolve this?
And, you know, the House gets out a week early in July because they don't want to deal with Epstein. It's still kicking around. You're going to special election today in Arizona. They're going to get the 218th vote on the discharge petition.
Because the Democrats are going to win, right?
Yeah, when she gets sworn in next week,
right.
Assuming that the House comes back. Maybe they don't. I mean, are they
all of this is spinning?
Are they essential or not? Really, is Congress essential? A lot of people
it's
might
an open
say,
question
stay
now.
home.
I want to play for you both one bit of my conversation with Joe Manchin. I want you to listen to it because I think it speaks for itself. Roll it. When does Joe Manchin run for president?
Well, I want to help whoever I can.
No. When is Joe Manchin running for president? You are the biggest flirt in American politics when it comes to presidential campaigns. So when are you going to run?
Let me check. I would have loved to have been. I was begging the Democratic Party to have a 30-day primary. When Joe Biden decided,
when the president decided not to
have a 30-day,
re-election.
and I'd have loved to have been in that discussion.
I'd have loved to be in that discussion. Well, they didn't have a 30-day primary, but there'll be a primary in 2028.
You know, Joe is trying to he's positioning himself like he always has, out front. He's always been out front. I love the question that you ask him. But we were talking about this in the green room. You know, there's a lot of folks in America right now who just feel an anxiety. They don't like the Democratic Party, my party. They didn't like the Republican Party. They don't like what they see in Donald Trump, and they're looking for a safe alternative. And to your question earlier to the former congressman is that what we've forgotten to do and what Republicans have done under a mask, in my opinion, with Donald Trump is reach out to workers and say, I feel your grievance. I don't agree with the way that they've done it, but we have to get back to talking to regular folks about regular things that affect their lives every day. And I think that's the window for 28.
Fred Upton.
You know, at the end of the day, it's going to be after the elections, both in 26 as well as in 28, it's going to be really close in the House.
You know Manchin well.
I do know. I know Joe really well. I got a cell number. I can call him up. He's a good guy. He was very involved with No Labels, and we talked about this in the green room a little while ago. No Labels actually with a unity ticket. We had a pathway to get 270 votes. Forget about Ohio. Forget Texas was a state that we thought we could win. Michigan was a state that we could win.
Manchin never pulled the trigger. He never went for it.
Manchin wanted in. Our problem was finding a Republican.
Ooh, breaking news right here.
So in other words, keep an eye on Joe Manchin is what you would say.
Yeah, but I don't think on the Democratic side, I think you're going to have this liberal progressive fight. I think a liberal prevails over a progressive. I think you got other candidates that are going to be there instead of a Harris. The Pennsylvania governor, the Kentucky governor, I think is. There's
going to be a lot of good Democrats.
You're going to have J.B. Pritzker with a lot of money. So it's going to be mighty interesting. You got my governor, Governor Whitmer. She's,
Early handicapping from Fred Upton. Chuck Rocha, always a pleasure to have you at the family table. Remember, the candy does not eat itself, so dig in. After decades of decline, are the world's nuclear powers entering a new arms race? The threat about that and what can be done to stop it next with former Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz. You're watching and very much enjoying The Takeout. Welcome back. Nuclear nonproliferation. Hard to say and increasingly hard to achieve. Here's why. A bipartisan group of former senior government officials and national security experts is pushing the United States to revitalize its strategy for preventing more countries from acquiring nuclear weapons. In its new report, the Task Force on Nuclear Proliferation argues there's an increased likelihood that a larger number than currently exists of countries will seek out nuclear arms, and it offers solutions for countering this, what it conceives to be a dangerous trend. I spoke to one of the authors of the report, former Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz. Mr. Secretary, good to see you. The report is entitled Preventing an Era of Nuclear Anarchy. That sounds pretty damn scary.
Well, Major, we've been going through a period where it has gotten a bit scary. We've heard Russia, the Russian leader, issuing nuclear threats in Ukraine. Of course, we've seen the actions and reactions in Iran. We've seen technologies emerging at breakneck speed that have untold consequences. And frankly, we have worse than historically, I would say. We have our allies uncertain about various security relationships that have led to a lot of discussions about potentially moving towards nuclear weapons. So we are concerned, and that's why in this report we pulled together an expert task force, bipartisan, very different security perspectives. But just to go to the top line immediately, reaching the unanimous conclusion that, in fact, nuclear proliferation remains a very bad thing for the United States and is something that is non-proliferation we should keep as a very high priority in our security posture.
Mr. Secretary, let's name check some of our allies moving in this direction. Saudi Arabia, Germany, Poland, South Korea, all recalibrating decades-long calculus that led them away from proliferation, now rethinking all that.
Yeah, and I would add to your list, Major, I would add Japan to that list. Again, another technically very savvy country that could certainly move there if they chose, and within Japan, one has certainly heard voices calling for that. But you're right, South Korea with the North Korean threat, Germany and Poland, especially stimulated by the situation in Ukraine. And of course, in this century, one country has gone nuclear, namely North Korea, and one country, Iran, has been viewed as on the threshold. So it's a dangerous situation. And ironically, perhaps, other than Iran, the countries that are of most concern for crossing the nuclear threshold are, in fact, our allies.
So, Mr. Secretary, one thing I learned when I was in college in 1983, trying to get a political science bachelor's, was to run counter to the students' papers that I was competing against to get my professor's attention. So again, this is 1983. In a poli-sci class, I wrote a paper that said more nations with nuclear weapons would be safer than fewer because they would all understand the risks better. They would all feel safer because they knew they had some and could compete against other peer rivals in the nuclear space. I got an A on the paper. Tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, yeah, we think, in fact, it is incorrect. It may have been beautifully written and deserved an A, but I think it would be bad policy. Our concern is that, especially if you look at the possibility of allied proliferation, that the risks, and I'll speak now, for the United States, the risk for the United States of getting pulled into a situation that could become nuclear goes up. So I think it's in our interest, and one of our in some sense, lead recommendation is that while nuclear nonproliferation should remain a very high priority for our security posture, the way we implement it has to evolve, and that particularly involves the relationship with our allies. We support, frankly, the move in the current American administration to strengthen or to have our allies strengthen their own conventional capabilities, and that should be integrated with the United States nuclear umbrella into an overall deterrence posture. We think that's the most stable thing, the way to avoid blunders and miscalculations that, again, could spiral out of control, and we believe that risk would be much greater with more countries, including our allies, in the nuclear camp.
My thanks to former Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz for joining us. Coming up, retired General Stanley McChrystal on the skills he learned on the battlefield and how they can translate and be helpful to the next generation of American leaders in and outside of the military. He joins me next right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to Takeout. Welcome to the Conversation Corner. So, lessons on leadership from the battlefield to the boardroom. That's what retired four-star General Stanley McChrystal says he will share in a new online class. The offering arrives this Thursday on the educational platform known as Masterclass, and I will betray myself as an insufferable elitist by saying I'm a subscriber to Masterclass. I love this stuff. Dan, it's great to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You had a career forged by tremendous high-visibility successes and some things that were criticized as failures. So you understand the the burdens of both and the advantages of both, because there are advantages to successes, but also advantages to failure. Do you go through that in your course?
I do, if you learn from failure. There's no advantage if you don't.
Right.
And so I think any challenge, not always whether you fail or not, is where you learn. And that's the heart of this master class.
And what you learn in the military, is it applicable in other realms of life? Or do you have to be in the military to learn things that can prepare you for a life that's never going to be in the military?
No, it's surprising how much the military is like everything else and how much everything else is like the military. We used to always joke that we were superior, more organized. Absolutely not true. And the reality
And you've learned that in your experience in the private sector.
I've been 15 years now working with private companies, and it's, except for the uniforms, it's the same thing.
Mm-hmm. And is the accountability different?
Well, the accountability has different structures to it. In many ways, the military is less flexible and less able to make decisive decisions, particularly in peacetime, than a corporation, because a corporate CEO can turn a company on a dime. A general, even the most senior, has laws and politics and things that hold them. And so as a consequence, when you get to war, sometimes generals find they've grown up in one environment and suddenly they have to be very decisive and open to change, and they're not ready for it.
Mm-hmm. You're here, and you have a distinguished career in the United States military. I would be derelict if I didn't ask you about some of the things going on at the Pentagon. One, there's been a tremendous changeover in senior leadership. Also, there's this pledge that the Pentagon wants reporters who cover the Pentagon to sign, saying they would not ever obtain information that's not pre-approved by the Pentagon. Will you evaluate those two things?
Well, I'll start with the Pentagon needs to change. It needs to improve its acquisition. It needs to focus on threats in the world. It needs to shake off some of the old habits. And sometimes that means some of the people who can't change need to go as well. But what doesn't need to change is the fact that we require an open press. It needs the scrutiny. Every entity, if it doesn't have the light of day shining on it, after a while, that's cobwebs and things you shouldn't have. And so I think that anything that constrains the press unfairly or unfortunately, I think in the long term is going to cost. I would say similarly, if you do loyalty tests for senior officers, after a while, you're going to get people who are simply loyal. And it's fine to fire generals for incompetence or misconduct. But if you have a litmus test for loyalty, we won't be getting the best and the brightest. We'll also get a politicized military over time. It will slowly and insidiously soak into the service, and we'll suddenly have a military like some of the countries we don't respect as much.
Candidly, did you ever brush up with that when you were in senior leadership positions?
No. Interestingly, we never talked about politics. Now, there may have been some political pressures on decisions about Afghanistan or Iraq, but in any sessions with my peers, I never knew which general was liberal or conservative. You didn't talk about it. It was considered inappropriate, and that was good. And I think that there will always be political pressures, but you've got to keep an apolitical military.
Stan, very quickly, I've got about 45 seconds. There is a conversation about young workers in America. They're not willing or able to work as hard as previous generations. That's a longstanding lament. What's your experience and leadership advice in that space?
I think they just need to be led. They need to be given an opportunity. They need more information in the past, but they will absolutely work as hard as we ever thought about it, and they'll think more while they're doing it.
And probably think in new ways.
Exactly.
Which should be harnessed, not dismissed.
It should challenge the organization to make it better.
Stan McChrystal, always a pleasure, sir.
My honor.
Great to have you here. Thank you so much. Happy Tuesday, everyone. This is The Takeout. You know what we are? Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever.